Next up, let's talk about cutting wood with hand saws. These are manually hand used saws. So like this one, this is called a back saw. Because of this stiff rib that it has along the back of the saw, it keeps it a lot stiffer than a traditional hand saw. They're typically shorter too, and another drawback is they can't cut all the way through the wood because that rib is wider than the blade itself. So you're limited by the width of the wood you're cutting as well as the depth of the wood you're cutting. Now, most saws that are meant to cut wood cut on the push, as it's known. So when you draw a saw towards yourself, that's the pull, and then when you push it away, that's the push. So whenever you're using a traditional wood saw, a hand saw or a back saw, you want to bear down and push harder when you're pushing away from yourself, and then draw back towards yourself lightly. And that is really pointed out if we look up close at the teeth on one of these saws, because the teeth, these little jagged edges, the part that actually does the cutting, they're actually oriented where they're pointing away from you. So there's sort of a diagonal edge facing away from you, and then a vertical edge facing straight down. So the saw is more aggressive when you push it away from you because it's just diving into the wood and cutting. And when you draw back, it's not cutting as much, no matter how hard you push down. So when you're using these saws, you want to focus on pushing hard and forward and down away from you, and then drawing back lightly, if not lifting the saw up entirely. So when we set up to cut a piece of wood, it's important to mark out what you're doing. Like with a square, you can strike a cross line. And by most conventions, many people put an X on the side of the line that you want to cut on. Because regardless of what the thickness of the blade you're cutting with is, you're always going to lose material. So if you cut right on the line you cut, your chosen piece of wood is going to be shorter than what you want. So if you make a line and then cut on the other side, the chosen piece of wood ends up exactly as what you want. So mark it with a square, put an X typically on the far side that you want to lose, and then clamp it in a vise or with some clamps against a sturdy bench. And when you set up with your saw, you want to take a couple of draws towards yourself. So it helps to lay the saw at a lower angle away from you and draw it back slightly towards yourself. Now, where's your other hand? So if you're placing the saw in your dominant hand, so say for most of us right-handed, what's your left hand doing? It's probably holding onto the workpiece, but what you want to make sure is your thumb is not in the way, because that saw may slip out and it may cut. And this is a sharp serrated blade we're talking about. So while your offhand, say your left hand, needs to be able to hold the workpiece, you don't want anything remotely in the way of where this saw blade may cut. So you want to several times draw that saw blade towards yourself slowly to start to create a groove. And when you're ready, you're going to push hard forward and down, and that's where the really aggressive cut takes place. That's where the real cutting action takes place. You'll notice I'm not cutting short and fast. That's just tiresome and really ineffective. So we take a couple of draws back towards ourselves, and then we push hard forward and down to actually make the cut, making sure that our other hand is out of the way. As you reach the end of the cut, you're going to want to flatten the saw a lot. Slow your cut and make it a more horizontal cut to prevent the wood from splitting out along the grain, and that'll help you to get just a much cleaner horizontal cut. If you really want to get accurate cuts, like a lot of our projects here with hand tools in the shop, what you're going to want to do is use a miter box. So this is this three-dimensional figure that has 90-degree and 45-degree angles, plus a bevel cut already set for you to guide your saw blade. So what we start with, like with our classic coaster project, where we need to cut a 90-degree straight angle in 90 degrees across our board, we use a square here, strike a line with the pencil, And of course we always want to cut on the outside of that line to make sure we're not losing the thickness of that saw kerf. But now we're going to clamp it in this miter box. So the piece of wood goes in, and you see we line it up with the straight across 90-degree angle for the saw cut that's going to act as our guide. But we clamp it to a bench, in this case with a C-clamp. So we line everything up, get our clamp ready, and we clamp it tight to the bench top. And then you want to lay the saw in that 90-degree saw cut curve and begin to carefully draw the saw back towards yourself in that downward angle. Remember, we need to make that starting curve, and the cut is made on the push. So push away from yourself to cut, slowly lower or flatten the angle of the saw, and continue to saw through using that angle, that straight 90-degree cut in the miter box. And what you'll find is it gives you a fairly perfect angle given a manual hand cut saw.